Chapter 23, Chapter 21, The Legendary Sorceress. Chapter 21, The Legendary Sorceress.
Looks like the carpenters are working hard,
Ryu noted as the team headed down the path into their town. It was actually paved now, as were all the roads linking the houses. 6 more of said houses were being built, still 3 to a row, south of those already standing.
Hope it won't be too noisy. It's not that bad,
Bao, who had been present during all of the initial construction, told him.
You get used to it. How long are we going to be sticking around before we head back to Tunlin? Why don't we figure that out in a few days?
Ryu suggested, trying to sound nonchalant.
I think we could all use a break, after that. Sounds good to me.
Kat agreed quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
Rand nodded as well as they approached their own home. As they walked up the steps, the door slowly opened, and the big man waved.
Hey, Nero. Hey. Nina.
The young girl who had opened the door asked hesitantly as they all froze. A wing clanswoman in her early teens with soft pink wings, she wore a dress that probably cost more than their entire building with a total lack of self-consciousness. Her hair was long and dark blue, the same color as Ryu's, and her eyes the same green, though hers were sadder, more hesitant.
You're back. Nina.
Nina whispered, then dropped to the ground and ran over to embrace her sister, neither of them saying anything more.
I believe this counts as confirmation of our break,
Spar said quietly, with respect if not emotion.
Yeah,
Ryu agreed.
Yeah, definitely.
Though it was Bo's theft from Trout that had first set Ryu to traveling the world, their adventures had truly begun when the two of them had been hired to recover Princess Mina's missing pet, which had resulted in them meeting Nero and Laden both. The heir apparent to the Windian throne since Nina had been forced to go into exile, she was a gentle, emotional girl who had never truly understood why she had had to be separated from her sister, and had come to visit her several times a year in the Orion Magic School. Later that evening, over dinner in the restaurant the Rivovs had added on as an extension to their house, Mina explained that she had come down to visit Nina at her new home. Unfortunately, she had arrived several days ago, while they were still embroiled in the mess at High Fort, so Nero had offered her their last spare room until they returned. Though Mina had been one of the guests for the meeting at Duke Kilgore's, most of them had been too busy to hang out with her much. Thus, she was almost as happy to see them again as well, especially Ryu, Bao, and Kat, who she had met before then. Though nobody came right out and said it, they all knew that they'd be remaining in hometown until Mina went back to Winland in a week. For his part, Ryu intended to spend it relaxing, but not even a full day passed before he found himself lying on his bed staring at the ceiling, trying to think of something to do. It was a distressing thought, that he had lost his interest in goofing off. Hopefully, it was only a temporary affliction, and he'd get over it soon. Kat had gone hunting with Bao, which left out sparring with her, and Nina was off with Mina. Bothering Sten at the moment was out of the question, and though he liked Jean, he wasn't quite desperate enough to spend an extended period of time hanging out with the Simon Prince, who was probably writing poetry or something. Neither was he feeling enthusiastic about seeking out Rand, who had been helping the carpenters out. Boredom beat that much physical labor, even now. Spar's location and habits were an enigma, which left only one man on the team.
Hey, son,
Nero said jovially as Ryu descended the steps into the combination library and meeting room at the center of the bottom floor.
Bored already? How'd you know?
Ryu admitted wryly.
I must be sick or something. You could always go help Rand and the guys out,
the old man joked.
That'd probably cure you real fast. Yeah, no.
Ryu shook his head.
Bao wasn't kidding when he talked about how bad I am at that sort of thing. There was a reason he wouldn't let me touch anything back when you guys were putting this one back together. Your call, son.
Nero shrugged.
Personally, keeping this place in shape while you're all out on the road's all the excitement I need in my life these days. We do kind of have a bit of collection of yahoos, don't we?
Ryu agreed.
Sorry about that. At least K doesn't cause problems, right? Oh, not unless you count dropping by 3 times a week to try and put me on pills for my health,
the old man drawled.
I tell her I've gone 70 years without touching no pills, and I ain't gonna start now, but she still keeps coming.
He chuckled.
Don't you worry, son. Speakin' honest here, with the kind of crew we got, it'd probably be worse if we had nothing but normal folks living round here. Least these ones won't care what we get up to. Point.
Ryu grimaced.
A slightly distressing point, but a point all the same.
He glanced at the bookshelf Nero was dusting. By now, most of them were filled, though where the old man had actually gotten the books was a mystery to him. A sudden thought struck him, and he tried to keep his voice casual as he changed the subject.
Anyways, I was wondering something. I don't suppose we've got any books on the Dragon Wars in here. Well,
Nero murmured, and Ryu turned to see him looking at him, eyes narrowed.
I was wonderin' how long it'd be 'fore ye came lookin' for one. I've been trying not to think about it,
he admitted.
But after what happened in High Fort. Well, there's trying to avoid something and then there's blinding yourself to it. And if everybody seems to insist that I'm in charge here, that means I've got a responsibility, whether I like it or not. Figured on something like that.
Nero nodded, glancing at the shelves.
Now, thing about history is that everybody agrees on the basics, but once you start getting into the fine details, every yahoo's got their own opinion, and most of 'em are crap. Heart o' the matter is, the only ones who know for sure how it all went were the folks who saved the world themselves, and none o' them were the book writing type, so the best we can do is settle for the ones who try the hardest to just stick to the facts without getting into speculation. And I'm guessing you know who those are.
Ryu said, smiling slightly. This wasn't the first time Nero had displayed an unusual degree of knowledge in some surprising areas, which had led them all to wonder a great deal about his life before they had met him as a transient sleeping in a ruined city.
Like I said, I figured you would come askin after these eventually.
Nero chuckled, hauling a pair of hefty tomes off of the shelves.
Just 'cause I'm on the perimeter o' all this mess don't mean I figure on keeping my eyes closed either. Now, the first Dragon War's trickier, but Marino's history of an apocalypse is almost all straight, even if the title's hyperbole. Just ignore the appendixes. As for the second, Crawfield's Fall of the House of Zog gets everything down, but you can skip the first few chapters, they're all about the Dark Dragon Empire's royal family, so they probably ain't important. Yeah, the only one who was really involved was the last Emperor Zog, right?
Ryu recalled, taking the books.
And maybe his daughter, but only marginally, in her case. Bit more than marginal, considerin' she's one of your ancestors, if I'm gettin' all this right,
Nero corrected him.
Her son ended up marryin' one o' the daughters o' the Queen o' Windia. United the Light and Dark Dragons. Wait, seriously?
Ryu blinked.
So I'm descended from 3 royal houses? Laudin dem it all.
He resisted the urge to slap his face. If he tried holding the books one-handed he'd probably drop them on his foot.
Yeah, I've got a lot of reading to do. Least you got time for it.
Nero chuckled.
Want me to spread the word to leave ya alone? Actually.
Ryu shook his head.
Just the opposite. If anybody wants to talk to me about anything, right now's the perfect time for it, team or civilian. I'm gonna take these up to the roof to read 'em, so I'll probably be up there for most of the week. Gotcha.
Nero nodded.
I'll let 'em all know your office hours, then. Have fun, son. Next time, I'll have a desk and everything,
Ryu joked, heading upstairs.
See you around.
He hadn't been much for books for a very long time. Instead, he had left that to Bao, claiming that the other man was more suited to it and that he felt more comfortable with a blade in his hand. In truth, though, there was more to the story than that. His father had been a very studious man, a habit he had encouraged in his son, and after losing his family, Ryu had simply never been able to feel the same about the hours of reading he had done on a daily basis before then. Because of that, he was slightly hesitant about falling back into the habit, even if he told himself this was only going to be a one-time thing. However, though the first few hours were slow, he soon found himself glued to the book on the First Dragon War. Whoever Moreno had been, he had recounted the time in which the goddess Miria had played all the world against itself in grand style, and the hours passed like lightning as he read the accounts of battle after battle, realizing the significance of details he had never grasped as a child. For the entirety of the first day, nobody bothered him, which was unusual enough to almost make him think that Nero had told everybody to leave him alone after all. That illusion was shattered when he descended for dinner, during which numerous cracks about his office were made at his expense. Though he bore it with good humor, he nevertheless decided that meals would be the only time he came down over the next few days. Hopefully, that would provide enough time for the team to find something else to amuse them. They had an unfortunate tendency to drive a joke into the ground.
Now, here's something I never thought I'd see,
Bao cracked as he walked up on the roof sometime during their second day back, reinforcing that fact.
Ryu Battison, nose so deep in a book it'll get stuck. There's a trick to avoiding that.
Ryu closed the book and hefted it in one hand.
Come over here and I'll show you how it's done. Grouchy, isn't he?
Ran chuckled, following Bao up with a slight grunt of irritation as he shoved his 6-foot shoulders through the stairwell.
I thought books were supposed to help people relax. Not that I know. I can barely even read. I thought you said you were getting through that book on white magic I gave you.
Bao gave him a look.
Yeah, but I asked Spar for help on the tough words,
Rand explained.
Doesn't even give me shit about it. Have I mentioned how glad I am to have someone else on the team who acts like an adult? There's Nero.
Ryu pointed out with a smirk.
He's about as adult as you get. He's wrapped all the way back around,
Rand retorted.
Doesn't count.
He raised an eyebrow at the book.
Is that really any good? I'd never be able to make it through something like that. Magic I can stand barely, but history? No way. It helps that it's actually directly relevant to us,
Ryu explained, glancing grimly down at the book.
For one, Kawada isn't here. What, on the demon side?
Bao snorted.
Not that surprising. Miria called them out when everybody finally figured out what she was up to, didn't she? I think so, yeah.
Ryu nodded.
I haven't gotten that far yet. But that wasn't where Kawada was. At least, he didn't start that way. Wouldn't surprise me if he stayed loyal to her even then, from what this says about him so far. Wait, you mean he was mortal back then?
Bao blinked.
Hey. So. When he said he was a real demon, he just meant he had been one for more than 2,000 years. Exactly.
Ryu glanced down on the book.
It says he had another name back then, but I guess he traded it in near the end of the war or something. The author gets a little ahead of himself, sometimes. He was the brother of the Dark Dragon King, and even then, he was a total psycho. The book doesn't come right out and say it, but it seems to be implying that he was the one who convinced the king to take up with Miria in the first place. Yeesh.
Rand grimaced.
Heavy stuff. No kidding.
Ryu closed his eyes.
Ridiculous as this sounds, it makes what we went through look like a cakewalk. I'm at the point where my ancestors trying to forge a strong enough coalition of countries and clans to actually end the war, but he's not having much luck so far.
He put the book aside.
But all that aside. What's up?
Bao and Rand shared a look.
It's Sten, buddy,
Bao explained.
We don't know. I mean.
He trailed off, exchanging another glance with Rand.
He's acting weird.
Ryu guessed.
That's not exactly surprising, considering last week. That's the thing, Chief.
Rand shook his head.
He's not acting weird, I mean. As soon as we got back, he just went back to joking and laughing and flirting with girls, like he always does. Shouldn't he? You know. Be a little different. Oh.
Ryu thought for a moment, looking to the southeast. The mountainous border between Oria and Highland was dimly visible, and the sun was high above it, creeping towards the noon heights.
Well. Maybe. But you know. I don't think Sten ever actually stopped thinking about his past. About what he went through. I don't really think he could. Yeah, probably not,
Bao agreed.
I mean, he jokes a lot. But he's had a pretty hard life, even by this team's standards. And that's saying something. So maybe he is dealing with what happened back there,
Ryu suggested.
The same way he's been dealing with his past all his life, ever since he left there. It's the only way he knows how. If we tried to shake that up, we'd probably just make it worse for him. Maybe the best way we can help is to do the same. Just treat him like we always do. He might have a point,
Rand agreed.
When you get right down to it, Sten's a total fraud. But he's got a good reason for it. I like guys like that. Exactly.
Ryu nodded.
Try talking to Sana. She and Siso are defused while we're here, right? If anybody'd know, it'd be her. Hadn't thought of that,
Bao admitted.
Probably because talking with her is. Well. Yeah.
He made a face, and the other two men both nodded.
Besides, I think her and Sten are kind of taking a break from whatever. For now. Really?
Ryu blinked, then slowly nodded in realization.
Oh yeah. That business with Elforon. Exactly.
Rand shook his head.
I know about as much about romance as I do about archery, but even I can see why the girl might not have been too keen on that. Any girl would,
Bao agreed.
Can't say I'm surprised she went for Sten, you know? Looked all pretty and petite, but she was as savvy as they come. Pretty cool. Don't let Sylvia hear you talk like that, man,
Ryu told him, smirking.
Like you need to tell me that.
Bao snorted, then sobered.
You're probably right. About Sten, I mean. It's just. That was pretty intense, you know? For all of us. Not just him. It was a pretty crazy place,
Rand agreed.
I mean. An entire country of soldiers? That's about as far as you can get from the kind of stuff I grew up around.
He glanced at the books.
I don't even know how that sort of thing could even happen. Is there anything in there about that place? Highland.
Ryu shook his head.
That clan wasn't even around back in the first, as far as I can tell. They're one of the more recent ones. I think there's some mention of them in the second, but I haven't got that far yet. Just curious.
Rand shrugged.
Let me know when you get that far, hey.
Bao asked as they turned away.
I've always kind of liked learning about that sort of thing. New clans, you know? How they first take their place in the world. We'll leave you to it, then. Better you than us,
Rand added.
Har har.
Ryu rolled his eyes as they both disappeared down the stairs, chuckling. He returned to his reading then, stopping only for lunch, and then dinner later, though he took a break at that point, resuming after breakfast the next day. It was at around the same time then that another man came up to speak with him, one familiar in a less recent sense.
Hey, Ryu.
A young-looking man in casual clothing called as he came up onto the roof, only the receding line of his short blonde hair hinted at his real age.
They said I could find you up here. Hans.
Ryu grinned, rising from his studies to walk over and shake his hand.
About time you got here, man. What kept you? Got lost,
his old friend admitted sheepishly.
Wound up in the wrong place entirely.
Looking around from the rooftop, he whistled.
When I first saw this place, I was sure I had made another mistake. All this is yours, man. Well, sort of,
Ryu hedged.
Everybody keeps telling me I'm in charge, so I just go along with it, but the guy who really runs the show is my team's agent. He's the one who's here 24/7 unless something comes up. The rest of us spend most of our time on the road. Heard about that, too.
Hans shook his head.
You and Bao, heading up your team of mercs. Freelance adventurers,
Ryu corrected.
Right, right.
Hans chuckled.
I mean, you guys always wanted to, I remember. Just didn't figure it would happen on this big a scale. Can't really say I did, either,
Ryu agreed, watching the carpenters and Rand cheer as they successfully fitted the roof into place on one of the houses.
Some days I still don't really believe it. I have a town. How the hell did that happen? It's been one hell of a year.
Glancing at Hans, he frowned slightly.
Did Elder Allen tell you the story? Yeah, him and Duke Kilgore.
Hans nodded, sobering as well.
I have to admit, Ryu. Even with both of them, I'm still not sure I believe it all. I mean... Demons? Really?
He raised an eyebrow.
I wouldn't if I'd been there, either.
Ryu sighed.
I think the next time we run into one, we'll see if we can haul the skeleton back. They all burst into flame when we kill them. Maybe that'll be a little more convincing than just words, even words from a paladin of Saint Eva. Did Elder Allen tell you one of them was verifying all that? He did,
Hans admitted.
That's mostly why I kept listening. Even so.
He left it hanging, looking awkward.
No, it's fine,
Ryu assured him.
I should have known something like this would be bound to happen eventually.
Hans had always been a skeptic for as long as he had known the man, unlike Azusa and McLean, and it wasn't surprising that he was digging in his heels over the concept of fairy tales made reality. Ryu's first thought was to give him proof of at least one supposed impossibility, but for some reason, he disliked that thought. It seemed like it would cheapen the breath of fire somehow, to use it for such a casual reason.
It's okay, man,
Hans told him.
Maybe it's just something like whether a guy believes in Saint Eva or not, right? That never bothered me none. Well. Maybe,
Ryu muttered, thinking quickly. He could almost see Hans's mind closing.
But look. Would it help any if a member of the Windian royal family told you we were on the level? Someone like that wouldn't have any reason to bullshit mugs like us, would they? Princess Mina.
Hans blinked.
Wait, she's here. She's old friends with our team's black mage,
Ryu explained.
Comes by to visit every so often.
He paused for a moment before continuing.
Don't let this get out, either, but... Did Elder Alan tell you who our first jack of all trades was? Prince Jean,
Hans said slowly.
Yeah, that's right. And McLean and Azusa said you had just gotten back from some job for the Highlander Princess, too. Yeah, that one paid pretty well.
Ryu chuckled with forced lightness.
I'll bet.
Hans shook his head slowly.
Your first jack of all trades? You've got another one. Well, maybe,
Ryu said honestly.
I'm not sure yet if it's going to stick around for the long haul or not, but it's with us for a while. And the reason I'm referring to it as it is because it's a grass man. Wait, what?
Hans's eyes widened.
Yup.
Ryu nodded.
And we've got a few fusion clanswomen living next door. A paladin of Saint Eva helps us out every now and then, and so does some thief girl from a clan I've never even seen before, even in books.
He shrugged.
This is a weird town, Hans. I'm gonna be honest with you on that score. I mean, it was more or less founded by a team of freelance adventurers a few months back, and look at it now. Even when we're not around, I'm not gonna say things are normal, because they probably aren't.
As if to drive the point home, the carpenters were suddenly assaulted by a flock of paint cans that had somehow sprouted wings, chased by a wildly cursing lacquer, who was sporting a brand new coat of rainbow.
Didn't know he knew magic,
Ryu muttered, watching the debacle.
Looks like he's not too good at it. Yeah, that's just what my day needed. Saint Eva and Loudon willing, Ner'll be able to sort that out without dragging me into it.
He glanced at Hans, who was giving him a cautious look.
Well. You're pretty cynical about it,
Hans said slowly.
It's like that kind of crazy shit is just business as usual to you now. Probably because it kind of is,
Ryu admitted, wincing.
Like I said. This year has been messed up. I kind of had to get used to it, or else I'd go crazy. Bao, Rand, Nina, and Sten are in the same boat.
He smirked.
Kat, Jean, and Nero had a head start on us. They were always a little crazy. Like Azusa and McLean, right?
Hans chuckled.
Bet those two didn't have any trouble getting used to this at all. Yeah, they didn't even ask any questions,
Ryu recalled.
Look, man. If you're having second thoughts. Actually, you've convinced me,
Hans told him, and he blinked in surprise.
Not about everything you said. Not completely. But I'm not ruling it out, either. I guess what I'm saying is if you guys can all get used to this sort of thing, maybe if I stick around long enough I'll stop caring, too.
He smiled slightly.
Besides, some Hyuki's thing starts causing trouble around here, I don't need to believe in it to hit it right between the eyes, now do I? Guess that works.
Ryu agreed.
Glad to hear it. We could use a general store around here. Worked out how you're gonna get your merchandise in. I've got a couple ideas,
Hans said, smiling.
Figure I'll work it out once I've actually got the place set up. I'll let you get back to your...
He glanced at the books.
Your, history lesson, then. Long story.
Ryu rolled his eyes, then added a cheerful comment as Hans left, out of pure whimsy.
Oh, and if that statue of Loudon starts talking to you one day, don't freak out. He's retired. Right.
Hans nodded slightly as he left, and with a chuckle, Ryu returned to his reading. A few hours later, he took a break for lunch before going back up to finish up the first book, heading into the climax of the war when the entirety of the world finally united against Myria, prompting her to call up her hordes of demonic servants to defend her flying fortress. He was right at the point when his predecessor's strike team were about to head in when he heard footsteps on the stairs once more, and turned his head to see Nina and Jean coming up.
Mon ami?
Jean asked.
We are not disturbing you, I hope. Nah.
Ryu closed the book.
I'm enjoying this, but you guys take precedence. How's Mina? She's having the time of her life,
Nina murmured, smiling wistfully.
Our parents are a bit overprotective of her when she's at home, so her visits to me were the only real time she felt like she could act freely, and even then her entourage were always paranoid about people figuring out who she was.
She frowned thoughtfully then, probably thinking that they'd been right to do so, considering the Joker gang's eventual kidnapping of her, before continuing on.
This is probably the first place in her life aside from Duke Kilgore's manor where nobody's been telling her to be careful. Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to come looking for her with trouble in mind here.
Ryu chuckled.
And if they do, they'll regret it. Exactly.
Nina nodded.
She's out with Kat and Bao right now. Apparently, she wants to learn how to use a crossbow. I'm not sure how well that'll work out, but I trust those two. I guess it's a princessly weapon,
Ryu said after a moment.
Hey, better that than, say, an axe or something. Indeed, Mon ami,
Jean agreed.
Many was the time I worried when Petabe would take an unhealthy interest in some sort of weaponry such as morning stars, but fortunately, her interest was always fleeting. By comparison, a crossbow is not so bad, no.
Ryu and Nina shared a glance as they both imagined Jean's little sister, a nearly psychotically overdramatic adolescent, with a morning star. Both of them shuddered.
Mina told me the two of them have been exchanging letters,
Nina said after a moment.
I suppose it's for the best of both our countries that they're becoming close friends, but I hope Petabe doesn't rub off on her. Sorry, Jean. Non, it is fine,
Jean assured her.
I had considered another possibility, in truth, and one much more fortunate. Perhaps your sister will be a calming influence on mine, and she will learn some more. Restraint, yes.
Ryu and Nina both considered this as well.
Nah,
they said in unison.
It was worth a shot.
Jean shrugged, sounding much more normal than usual for a moment, before recovering.
Well, Mon ami, there is something we both wished to speak with you of, yes.
He glanced at Nina, who nodded.
It's about those new houses,
she explained.
We both know some friends who might be interested in moving down here, and we thought it would be best if we discussed it with you together. Hey, any friends of yours are friends of mine,
Ryu told them both.
That's what it means, being part of this team, right? So who's moving in? Do you remember Beretta?
Nina asked.
We met her in that lodge on the Windia-Nanai border. She was my closest friend, growing up in Windia, until I had to leave.
Her eyes clouded over momentarily before she shook it off and continued.
I never really got along well with other highborn children other than Jean, so when I made friends with her one day, we were both determined to keep seeing each other, even though our families didn't approve. She's a blacksmith, right?
Ryu recalled.
Looking for a place to set up shop. With that uncle of hers, the traveling weapons salesman. What was his name, Leamington? He was the only one in her family who didn't mind,
Nina recalled.
That we were friends, I mean. He thought it was hilarious, but in a good way, he had helped sneak Beretta out so we could spend time together.
She glanced at Jean mischievously.
So of course, when my friend from Sima came to visit, of course we had to escape from the palace so he could meet her. The stories I told when I returned.
Jean grinned.
What other young boy is so lucky as to have so much fun with two cute girls, yes? Oh, boy.
Ryu smiled as well. This was sounding far too similar to some of his Anbo's childhood shenanigans, the kind which hadn't ended badly.
How many laws did you break? I forget, to be honest,
Nina admitted.
It was fun, though. Anyways, Leamington's actually looking to go into business with her, he's getting old, and considering retiring. What he doesn't know about weapons and armor is probably obsolete, and he's got contacts all over the world. Between his expertise, and Beretta's skill in the forge, I believe they'd have everybody here covered as far as our local smithy would be concerned. More than covered, by the sounds of it.
Ryu nodded.
Well, you've sold me. Go ahead and let them know they can have a house if they want it.
He glanced at Jean.
What about you? A friend of yours looking for a place, too? Indeed, and it is also one whom you are acquainted with,
Jean explained.
You recall my friend Salvatore, yes? The sculptor of paramount skill? He has expressed desire to travel to another land to me before, and has now written me asking if we would be willing to take him in. A sculptor, hey?
Ryu shrugged, thinking back, the man had actually been far less flamboyant and eccentric than he would have expected from one of Jean's artistic friends.
Well, hey, we've got the houses, and we do owe him one for helping us out with Kawadara. He wants to move into this madhouse, tell him to go right ahead. I knew you would understand, Mon ami,
Jean said with a smile.
Your reading is going well, I hope. I'm almost done with the first Dragon War.
Ryu glanced down at the book.
The only real disappointment so far is that there isn't as much detail on Obelisk as I was hoping for. Maybe there'll be more near the end, though. Indeed.
Jean pursed his lips thoughtfully.
One must wonder how it was that such a thing became the home of the Highlander clan, yes. That was after the Second Dragon War,
Nina told him.
As I recall, it ended up crashed in the wasteland of Skanda after the first, and was returned to the sky briefly for the climax of the second.
She frowned.
What I'm wondering is how some of it ended up in Sima, if the main body went down in Highland. Nothing should have been able to propel two separate pieces of a castle, even a flying one, to opposite ends of the world. Oh, that one's easy,
Ryu said, smiling.
I remember that one even before I get that far. Oh.
Nina smiled as well, as did Jean.
Is that so? By all means, Mon Ami, educate us,
the prince added.
How did such a thing come to pass, then? It happened because a freaking goddess freaking exploded in the heart of the damn thing,
Ryu pointed out.
When you're talking about a divinity detonating, I think it's safe to conclude physically possible goes right out the window. A valid point.
Nina coughed.
Well. That explains that. Quite,
Jean agreed.
At any rate, it is not like such knowledge is widely known. The Highlanders themselves did not seem to be aware of their ancestral home's true identity, after all.
He shook his head, looking unusually dismal for a moment.
There was a lot of damage to the castle because of that, so perhaps it is for the best, yes? It will take much work to fix. Elforon can handle it,
Nina assured him.
She knows what she's doing, even if she's unlucky romantically.
She glanced at the book.
I'm curious as to how our ancestors in the First Dragon War. Well, how their relationship turned out. They did have a relationship, right? Oh, yes.
Ryu nodded slowly.
As a matter of fact, that was what turned the tide of the war. When the Prince of the Light Dragons and the Princess of the Wing Clan were betrothed to seal the alliance between their countries. Back then, they didn't really know that inter-clan marriages were a bad idea. Everybody was so xenophobic because of Miria playing them against each other that it didn't really come up until after the war. Oh.
She glanced down.
I suppose times were different back then.
She glanced off at the horizon, as Jean coughed awkwardly.
Seeing Elforon, though. It made me think that she's the kind of girl who wouldn't let anything stand in her way if she loved somebody. Even something like Clan. I mean, I know Sten. But if he wasn't a Highlander, she still wouldn't care. And yet, I doubt Sten has ever told her he loved her.
Jean shook his head.
Other countries are such strange places. You would never let something like that get in the way, either,
Nina agreed, smiling slightly, before glancing at Ryu.
What about you, Ryu? I mean... Well...
She began looking flustered, almost tripping over her words as she continued quickly.
You know, if you fell in love with somebody from another clan, like Sten or... Oh, damn. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Ryu held up his hands, his own thoughts rushing. He could tell that Nina was desperate for a way out of the current subject at that point, so instead of pushing it further into dangerous territory for both of them, he seized on what she had said.
Sorry to interrupt, but I really don't think I want to talk about me falling in love with Sten. Eep.
She blushed.
No, I didn't mean. Come, Nina.
Jean took her hand gently, meeting Ryu's eyes for a moment and nodding slightly before turning to her.
With all respect to Monsieur Ryu, I do not really think such things are ones he is experienced in, no. Hey, what's that supposed to mean?
Ryu growled, playing along.
Nothing at all, Mon Ami,
Jean replied, eyes innocent.
Come, Mademoiselle Nina, let us go downstairs, have some tea, and calm down, before we talk more of this, yes. Right,
Nina agreed quickly.
Thank you, Jean, and... I'll see you tonight at dinner, Ryu. See you then.
Ryu nodded as they left, then exhaled heavily.
Oh, man.
After that conversation, returning to the book's inclusion of their near-identical ancestors' romance was out of the question, and so he called it a day, going down to busy himself around town with various idle whims until dinner. The next day, he went back up to the roof to finish up and move on to the second book. He was on the first few pages of that when another visitor made her way up the stairs.
Mr. Battison?
Kay asked, poking her head up over the edge of the stairwell.
Are you still up here? Not planning on going anywhere for the next couple of days except for meals and sleep,
he said, closing the book.
Got a lot to catch up on. So I've heard.
She smiled slightly, glancing at the books.
Is it helpful? It's illuminating,
he replied politely after a moment's thought. For all her friendliness, Kay was the most devout believer in Saint Eva in the town, and he didn't want to offend her with his growing consideration of a more pantheonic view of the heavens.
We think we've been through a lot, but compared to what the Dragon Wars were like, so far, this isn't really so bad. I mean, sealing a so-called goddess away in an island fortress locked by 7 magical keys scattered across the world? Even if she wasn't an actual deity, that's playing on a level way beyond anything we're dealing with. I suppose it does help to put things in perspective, she acknowledged. Still, slaying demons is no small feat either. I've heard there have been more of them, even. The one in the carnival wasn't so bad, Ryu explained, eyes darkening. High Fort had another full-fledged demon lord, though. That one sucked. He frowned. I told everybody to stop by and see you if they felt anything that our white mages hadn't been able to fix up. Nothing's wrong with any of them, is it? No, no, she assured him, holding up a folder she had been carrying under her arm. It's more older things that I'm concerned about. Older? Ryu raised an eyebrow. I'm getting the feeling this is one of those discussions I might want to be sitting down for. That may be best, Kay agreed as they both sat down on the building's edge. I'm not a white mage, but I know a few. I've heard them called grey magic tricks. Like that scan spell you used on me, during my last checkup. Ryu nodded. I remember. Nero's the same, doesn't know a bit of white or black, but there's a few in between. You use that one on everybody. Yes, although some of them took some talking into it. She smiled briefly before taking out black pieces of paper with amazingly detailed images of various skeletons on them. I copied what I was able to get out for more detailed analysis later on, and I found that you and most of your team seem to have a great deal more of what you would call residual damage built up in your bodies than I would expect, considering your age. I was hoping maybe you could shed a little light on that. I'll do my best, Ryu promised. Why don't you start with me and bow? All right. She put what looked like a more or less human skeleton on top and began pointing at it. Have your wrists been broken at any time in the past? When I was 12, Ryu admitted. Same with bows. Slavers caught us, down in a corsair slum, and we had to do that to get them out of the manacles. You broke your own wrists? She demanded, eyes wide. It was either that or get sold to some bastards who liked kids our age. Ryu grimaced, recalling some of the potential customers they had seen as they were being shoved down towards the cells. Lucky for us, the authorities called in a white mage to heal us after we escaped and got the city guard down there. I see. She blinked once. That must have been horrifying. You get used to shit like that happening when you have the kind of life we used to. Ryu shrugged it off. That wasn't even the worst of it. He thought for a moment. I think maybe I see the problem here, Miss Sindel. Kay, please, she said, recovering slightly. Only if you agree to make it, Ryu, he replied. But anyways. Ray said you were both raised by the Church of Saint Eva. That's correct. She nodded. Both of us were orphans, as was Gabriel, our other brother, until the church took us in. I'm glad it did, Ryu said honestly. You see, me and Bao didn't have anybody like that. His parents are dead, and mine are gone. We basically grew up on the open road, and that's not really a good place for a couple of boys by themselves. The way we looked at it, as long as we were alive, there was hope. Anything short of dying, or being permanently crippled. After a while, we learned to endure it. He pointed at his neck. The scars faded by now, but for a while, I had one there. Had to fake hanging myself to get out of some trouble with the Capitan Guard. I never. Kay murmured, scrambling for words. I mean, are the others like that? She shuffled her papers, producing another, smaller skeleton with a long tail. Miss Chon. Cat. She has the hands of a boxer. Her knuckles have all been broken, multiple times. It must hurt her even to move her fingers by now. Cat makes us look like lightweights by comparison, Ryu said quietly. She was in the same boat as me and Bao, except she didn't have a partner. She was all alone, and a girl on top of that, which must have made her stand out even more to unsavory sorts. But she made it out. She's tough. As long as her hands still work, she'll suck it up. He scowled. That's not going to happen, is it? Her fingers won't become paralyzed or anything. As long as nothing worse than what she's already endured happens, I suppose,
Kay said after a moment.
I'm surprised they're still as dexterous as they are, but from what I've seen of her, if they're still perfectly mobile, then as long as I keep seeing her regularly.
She shook her head, still looking slightly stunned.
Mr. Sten, I wasn't surprised by. When I asked him, he admitted to me that he had been a soldier, though he didn't say anything more. Nero.
She smiled slightly.
I've given up asking. Probably the best course of action, when it comes to Nero,
Ryu agreed.
Prince Jean and Rand are both about what I'd expect,
she continued.
And I'm not really an expert on grassman physiology, I don't think Spar even has a skeleton. Nina, though. She's the one I really wanted to talk to you about. Nina.
Ryu blinked, concerned.
I hadn't really thought. Well, a top-class school isn't really the sort of place you expect a lot of injuries in. I thought so, too,
Kay agreed.
But then. Well.
She produced an image of a winged skeleton, and pointed at the back, where said wings joined the spine.
You see the damage here, and here? At the bases of both wings. Are you saying what I think you're saying?
Ryu muttered slowly, staring at the picture.
I'm afraid so,
Kay agreed.
At some point in her past. I'd guess between 8 and 10 years ago. Her wings were surgically reattached. After somebody had completely severed both of them. Without white magic, she'd never have been able to fly again. Saint Eva,
Ryu hissed, then winced as Kay did as well.
Sorry. It just slipped out. This is just troubling.
She guessed.
I thought so as well. You don't know, then? No,
he admitted.
She's never said anything about that to me. And I don't want to ask. I wouldn't, either,
she conceded.
And I won't. While we're on the subject, though, there's something else you should know.
She pointed at the skeleton.
I'm not sure if you knew, but wind Ians have hollow bones. Shit,
Ryu muttered.
I knew she was the most fragile out of all of us, but I didn't know it would be that bad. That means her bones are easier to break, right? And when they do, they probably heal worse. Correct.
Kay nodded.
It seems she's avoided that for the most part, but there is some concussive damage to her ribs. Kawadara,
Ryu recalled.
Yeah. I think we all broke a lot of bones there. Your collarbone, 1 shoulder blade, 1 arm, and 10 ribs, some of them twice or even 3 times,
Kay said clinically.
You're lucky you have 2 very good white mages, or you would be in Saint Eva's hands right now. Oh, I am.
Ryu shook his head.
And they're not the only ones I'm glad I had for that one. Kawadara and Shakukai. They were real monsters. I'll be honest with you, Kay. I'm really looking forward to the day we can stop dealing with this kind of craziness and just take regular jobs. Until then. Even after then. I'll try and make sure Nina stays at the back of the action. It's for the best,
Kay told him, smiling wistfully.
For all of us. I believe that Ray cares for Nina a great deal. Oh,
Ryu said slowly, recognizing the look on her face.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. Kind of like I'm guessing you care for Ray. Yes,
Kay admitted it honestly.
I've loved him for years now. But his vows, as a paladin.
She shrugged.
I'm a realist. Same here.
Ryu shook his head.
It's more complicated than that, even. I care for Nina a great deal, and she for me. But so does Kat, and I.
He grimaced.
Yeah. It's complicated. On second thought, perhaps I'm not quite so unlucky as I thought,
Kay murmured.
And I thought having to let Gabriel down easily, repeatedly, was bad. You were stuck in the middle, too.
Ryu winced sympathetically.
I don't know, sounds like you had it worse than me. At least me, Kat and Nina have all agreed this is bad all around and we all want to figure out a solution.
He sighed, then smiled.
Pardon the blasphemy, but romance can just go to hell. I'll let it slide, just this once.
Kay smiled slightly.
And I'll stick to medicine. It's less complicated.
Standing back up, she nodded professionally.
I appreciate your time, Ryu. Remember, we agreed to a checkup on the first day of every month. As long as we're in town,
Ryu reminded her.
If we're on assignment in the wasteland of Skanda, we won't really be able to break it off just for that. As soon as you return, in such situations, then.
She nodded, departing.
May Saint Eva guide your path.
The rest of his day was undisturbed. He made it through the tale of his ancestors' gradual formation of an 8-man group that drove back the entire massed forces of the Dark Dragon Empire from their attempted conquest of the Eastern world, before continuing on to strike at the heart of their own territory in the west, more than halfway before breaking for dinner. That night, however, he found himself unable to sleep, and so took a candle up to the roof to continue reading as the heroes began encountering their true enemies. Emperor Zog's elite team of superpowered freaks, the Tiamat unit.
Wow,
Kat called up the stairs after a while, and Ryu turned to watch her and Sten walk up together.
That must be some book. And I can't believe I just said that with a straight face. Books,
Ryu corrected her.
Plural. And I just couldn't sleep, is all. I haven't been that bad. We haven't sparred since you got back,
she pointed out.
Once. Okay, maybe they have kept me kind of occupied,
Ryu admitted.
This stuff is pretty relevant to our interests, after all. We heard about Kawadara,
Sten said with a frown. He was looking slightly somber, but seemed more or less back to normal.
Don't suppose there was any mention of Shakukai? Nope.
Ryu shook his head.
Baruberry, though, and a couple others, one of which is probably our man down in the Sea of Trees. That was the first Dragon War, though. I'm on the second now, and aside from Miria, it looks like the bad guys were all mortal enough. Which isn't to say they were less dangerous. The Tiamat unit.
Kat made a face.
Even I know about those suckers. But they all died, right? Is there anybody else aside from the demon lords who'll still be around, good or bad? Only one that I'm absolutely sure of, so far.
Ryu stared up at the stars.
Deez, the legendary sorceress of Wiston. Last of the extinct Indigo clan, or so she claims,
Sten recalled.
Bit hard to disagree with her when she's the only one who'd know. One thing's for certain, nobody's seen anybody else of her clan in recorded memory. An apparently immortal sorceress of legendary power, wisdom, and beauty, she rises from millennia of hibernation whenever the world needs her, in order to assist the destined hero. How does she know?
Kat wrinkled her nose.
I mean, it's not like she's got some sort of alarm that goes off when it's time to save the world again, is it? Traditionally, one has to wake her up,
Ryu explained.
At least, both my ancestors did. And, well.
He grimaced.
If Spar signs on for the long term, the only slot we'll have left to fill is a second black mage. Not really hard to connect the dots at that point. Who?
Kat grimaced.
Not really sure how I feel about that. Especially with your buddy back in hometown, you know? Might get complicated. I know,
Ryu agreed.
But the nice thing is, if these books have it straight, she always picks her friends over the gods, so she might actually be on our side if it came to the destiny bullshit. Who knows, maybe she would want to try a new line of work. Well, my objections to destiny bullshit are all out the window by now.
Sten shrugged.
So I say we might as well go for it. You know how I feel about it,
Kat agreed.
Where is this Wiston place, anyways? It's actually supposed to be a moving city,
Ryu explained.
Back in the first Dragon War, it was apparently the counterpart to Obelisk. The place is on top of a moving mountain down in the desert of Arad.
He glanced at Sten.
I don't suppose your people know where it is right now. Sure they do,
Sten drawled.
Easy. On account of how the whole damn thing plowed into the cliffside about 10 years ago. We kind of noticed that, let me tell you. I'll bet.
Kat made a face.
So it's wrecked. A total loss.
Sten nodded.
It's probably almost buried in sand by now, but I know the spot, so we can go poke around. As long as everybody agrees, then I think we probably should, before heading over to Tunlin.
Ryu sighed.
If nothing else, she's apparently been there before, so she'll know her way around even if we'll still need to elect a translator. Let me talk to Rand about that,
Sten said thoughtfully.
He and Nina will probably be our only holdouts. And I'll take Nina,
Kat agreed.
I should be able to talk her into it. Thanks, guys.
Ryu nodded.
And if you've got time before lunch tomorrow, I'll probably feel like a spar, cat. Glad to hear it.
She winked.
I was starting to think you didn't like me anymore. Not likely.
He snorted.
Want me to leave you two kids alone up here?
Sten joked.
Are you kidding?
Kat punched him in the shoulder.
Nina would fry us.
Despite her jovial tone, there was something pensive in her eyes, an odd look for her.
Ah, geez.
Sten winced.
Sorry, guys. I wasn't thinking. We'll work this out eventually,
Ryu told him quietly.
It's fine. How about you? Doing okay? Me and Sana are giving it a break.
Sten shrugged.
It's no big deal. We were keeping things casual anyways. That's not.
Ryu started to say, then stopped as Kat gave him a look.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's fine, boss.
Sten gave him a tired smile, one far older than the rest of his face.
I just don't want to be a soldier anymore. That's all. I'm fine. Your call,
Ryu said quietly, and Kat nodded slightly.
Don't think I ever told you this, but thanks. For going back there with us. I'm on the team, aren't I?
Sten shrugged as he turned and walked back down the stairs.
All that's important. See you tomorrow, guys.
Kat didn't do the same. Instead, she walked over and sat down on the edge of the roof, looking over the town, and Ryu joined her. Side by side, they watched it for a while until she finally spoke.
Did you mean it? About figuring this out, eventually? Of course I did,
he replied softly.
I'm not going to just keep you and Nina hanging for the rest of our lives. That wouldn't be fair, and it wouldn't do any of us any good.
He took a deep breath before continuing.
Eventually, I think I'll be able to decide. Just not. Not today. It's not like it's your fault,
Kat pointed out.
We were both stupid enough to fall for the same guy, even though we're pretty much best friends by now.
She sighed.
I just don't want to end up like Sten, you know? Knowing who I'll care about, and who cares about me, but not being able to do anything about it. Maybe one of these days me, or her, will wind up in the same situation as you, and that'll solve it. One way or the other. Maybe,
Ryu muttered, thinking about it. As much as it would hurt, for either of them to choose somebody else, it would be infinitely preferable than having to reject one of them himself. Imagining hurting either Kat or Nina that much gave him almost as many bad dreams as Baruberry, and it was the main reason he felt so paralyzed, stuck evenly between the two girls.
Yeah.
Kat hesitated for a moment before continuing.
Does it make me a bad person? If I kind of wish Ray's vows were a loser? And that, if they were, and he put more effort into how he feels about Nina, that she might respond, and
She left it hanging.
Not at all,
Ryu told her honestly, not daring to look at the dragon's tear. He was more than a little afraid of what it would show him.
It just makes you a person. That's all. I guess that makes enough sense,
she agreed, giving him a soft smile.
One of these days. But not tonight. But not tonight,
Ryu agreed, before kissing her once, and though she seemed startled at first, after a moment she returned it, as fierce and hot as their first one. Drawing away afterward, they exchanged another smile before separating, Ryu picking up his books before following her down the stairs. Though he would have liked to say he never hesitated on the steps of the top floor, as she split off from him to go to her room next to Nina's, it wouldn't have been truthful. It was only for a moment, though, before he continued down to his own room, and fell asleep in his bed alone. The next day, he went up to the roof to finish the second book. It was to be Mina's last day, so they would be heading out tomorrow. Where they would be headed was a matter he left to Sten and Kat, as they had told him to, and he devoted himself to his reading instead. Aside from breaks for lunch, and for sparring with the latter like he had promised, he was undisturbed that day until sometime near sunset, just as he was finishing the second-to-last chapter.
Hey, Battison!
Rivob, one of the carpenters, yelled cheerfully as he came up.
Heard you were hitting some books up here. It's a special case, okay.
Ryu sighed, looking up.
Research, for the job we're on. Hey, I didn't say nothing.
Rivob raised his hands, though he was still grinning.
Anyways, thought I'd come give you a status report. We're almost done with the third house, and the foundations for the next 3 are about ready, so we'll be moving on to them pretty soon. Good.
Ryu nodded.
We've got 3 more citizens on their way here, so that's perfect. Man, you don't waste time, do you?
Rivob chuckled.
Try and wait for us to finish up the next 3 before getting anybody else in here, hey? Anyways, there's one more thing. There's a forest trail out behind Haseko's house, leading out into the woods next to Granny's. Leads up to an old dried up well. We were thinking about trying to see if we could get it working again. Sounds like a good plan to me.
Ryu nodded.
Have I mentioned just how much we owe you guys for all this? Like we told you back at Duke Kilgore's, it's worth it to build our own freakin' city,
Rivob assured him.
Besides, this place is great. I don't know where you find some of these yahoos, but they're my kind of people, and the missus thinks so too. Well, she ain't too fond of Sana and Siso, but aside from that. Yeah, not touching that one.
Ryu shook his head.
Wise man.
Rivob started to turn, then blinked as they both saw Spar's head emerge from the stairwell silently.
Hey, Spar. Didn't hear you coming up. How are you doing? I have no concerns,
the grass man replied politely.
And yourself, Mr. Rivob? Just talking about the construction with the boss here.
Rivob clapped Ryu on the shoulder hard enough to make him wince.
We're about done, though, so I'll get out of your hair so you can talk business. See you at dinner tonight.
He paused as he was about to head down.
Oh hey, my wife says thanks for the tip on the rosemary. Says you were right, it does work better. What use is knowledge of herbs if not used for the common good?
Spar said as the carpenter departed.
Looks like you're making friends,
Ryu noted.
Indeed.
Spar's face remained blank as it turned back to him.
It is somewhat strange, to me, for everybody to accept me so readily. Is this normal? Around here?
Ryu shrugged.
Pretty much. Not so sure about the rest of the world, but I guess everybody who moves into this place figures we're all on the same side pretty quickly. I thought it was just the team at first, but the more time I spend here. Well, anyways. You don't mind it or anything, do you? Of course not.
Spar shook its head.
I have even been attempting to reciprocate, though probably without a great deal of success. I have heard myself described as weird, but an okay guy, to quote several men. I had previously considered the word, guy, to be a gender-specific pronoun, but I've heard it used to describe me several times now, despite common knowledge that I am not male, so now I must wonder if my definition was inaccurate. It's one of those ones with multiple definitions,
Ryu replied after a moment of thought.
I'd explain it, but I think Bao would be able to provide a more accurate definition. Him or cat. I will request their assistance on the matter when next I encounter them, then,
Spar decided.
On a similar matter. I must inquire as to when we will be departing. A sufficient period of leisure time is understandable considering our recent ordeal, but I would judge that we are all sufficiently recovered by now. Nina's little sister is leaving tomorrow,
Ryu explained.
Mina. You've met her, right? We're planning on heading out at the same time.
He considered asking about the planned detour to try and find Dee's, but decided against it, considering the slightly worried tone in the grass man's voice, if not its face.
It's okay, Spar. We'll figure out what's wrong with Gandaroof, and fix it. I promise. Comradely reassurance,
Spar noted.
I should express appreciation for this. Thank you.
It paused for a moment.
If I might intrude on your time for a bit longer, there was another matter. The zeni we received from the Princess of High Fort. What about it?
Ryu frowned.
I'm about as good at math as I am with gardening, so I let Bao crunch the numbers, but it looked right to me. 9 ways. Equal shares. A logical way of dividing the amount,
Spar agreed.
And one more fair than most leaders would consent to, in my experience. It is not that concerns me, so much as that I received a share of that. I'm not quite sure why. Oh.
Ryu's eyes widened.
Oh.
After a moment, he smiled slightly.
Because you were on the team when we did the job, that's why. Call it whatever you like, but you did your part, so you got your pay. I've kind of been meaning to ask you something along those lines myself. Oh.
Spar replied, face as expressionless as ever, though something in its tone indicated that it was still trying to work his explanation out.
By all means, I am at your service. I'll cut to the chase,
Ryu decided.
Are you planning on splitting off after we get Gandaroof taken care of, or did you want to hire on, long term? We've seen you in action long enough to know that you know what you're doing, and a team like this does well to have a couple jacks of all trades on it like you and Jean.
For a moment, Ryu thought he had accidentally said something offensive. Spar had gone completely motionless, like a statue. After a few long moments, though, it spoke again, and its voice was strange, filled with a sense of wonder, like a child discovering something new and fascinating.
You would request my continued presence? The job's yours, if you want it.
Ryu nodded.
Pretty sure everybody else on the team agrees with me by now.
He raised an eyebrow.
Is it that strange an idea? It is unprecedented,
Spar told him, still staring straight ahead.
My kind are not accepted in society. Our reduced emotional capacity, and our irregular biology, are considered abhorrent. And even among my own kind.
It shook its head slowly.
I am considered eccentric, I suppose would be the best word. Most grassmen are sedentary, even in our youth, but as a sprout, I always felt a strange desire to travel the world. To see everything there is to see, experience all the world had to offer. And yet...
It finally met Ryu's eyes, speaking softly.
This is the first time, in all my years, that I have had friends. Well, you've got them now.
Ryu held out his hand, and after a long moment, Spar shook it, grip weak and delicate.
I'll take that as a yes, then, and for a good a reason as any. We'll travel the world, all right, and we'll all see things and places and people that nobody else ever has, or ever will. Welcome to the team, Spar. It is good to be on the team,
Spar said, tilting its head.
Well, then. If I may ask one more question. One of the young ladies next door has expressed a desire to fuse with me.
The white parts of the grassman's features began tinting pink.
What, exactly, does this entail? Oh, damn it.
Ryu slapped his face.
I really don't think I'd be able to provide a fair explanation to that. Sten and Jean would be the best ones to ask. I see,
Spar replied politely.
I will do so, then. If you will excuse me. Have fun,
Ryu called as Spar left, then turned back to his book to finish it up, and when he heard an explosion from next door about an hour later followed by a high-pitched shriek, he only smiled and closed the book.
Experiment unsuccessful,
he murmured to himself as he walked down the stairs for dinner. The next morning, they all bade Mina farewell before Jean warped them to a point in Highland they'd passed on the way up the cliffs. It was near a descending trail leading down into the desert of Arad, and while Sten had warned them away from it on their first time through, now it was apparently the best place to start from in order to reach the location where Wiston's remains were buried with a minimum of desert travel. The need for such haste became apparent very quickly. Between the blistering heat of the day, the freezing cold of the night, and the continual assault of wind and sand against every inch of their bodies not covered by the heavy robes Sten had advised them to bring, every minute they spent trudging east was a living hell. The horrific monsters that stalked the desert, far too deadly for even them to chance facing, were more icing on the cake than anything else. It was a week later that they finally found their destination. Running from a shambling golem of bronze, identical to the kind found in Tunlin though made of metal instead of stone, the group reached the top of the dune and abruptly saw the end of their ordeal straight before them. A colossal pile of architectural wreckage 10 times larger than their town, the moving city of Wiston defied the desert's efforts to swallow it in sand through sheer jumble. Sand could never bury such a mishmash. Ruins older than any living being lay there, destroyed but not forgotten, mixed with the rubble of the mountain it had once sat upon.
Saint Eva, finally,
Kat said after they all stared at it for a moment.
This had better be worth it. Where do we even start, though?
Nina pointed out.
Looks like somebody's made some kind of tunnel into that mess out of the debris,
Sten pointed out.
Let's try there.
Nobody else had any better ideas, and so they descended the other side of the dune and walked in. The tunnel stretched for at least half a mile, until they emerged into a torch-lit cavern, though a close inspection of said torches showed that they were magical in nature, burning without consuming the wood they were made of.
What is this place?
Jean asked in wonder as they all looked around. Despite being apparently hewn from solid rock, it was furnished like a lavish apartment, expensive rugs spread across the floor and paintings hung on the walls. One of said walls held modern kitchen equipment, including what looked to be a fairly new furnace as well as a sink. There didn't appear to be any food, but the dishes and utensils were all finely crafted. 2 doors led further into the cavern. Curious, Kat peeked into one of them.
It's a bathroom,
she reported, voice tinged with disbelief.
No toilet, though. But there is the hugest goddamn bathtub I've ever seen, and more girly stuff than an entire all-female army could ever use. Girly stuff?
Nina repeated, amused, and Kat made a face.
You know, makeup and shit. Perfume, and stuff like perfume. The book didn't mention any of this,
Ryu said dubiously, leading the way towards the other door.
I wonder if we've got. Aha. Now this is more like it.
The bedroom within was just as expensively furnished, with 6 wardrobes behind the massive bed. Despite that, said bed was messily unmade, and all the wardrobes were spilling over with empty bottles, more of which littered the floor.
Variator's finest zero malt.
Rand muttered, picking one up and examining it.
You gotta be kidding me. Good grief, look at the date on this. Ah, yes.
Spar looked at it.
A very good year. She always did enjoy her whiskey. And anything else alcoholic, really. Wait, what?
Sten zeroed in on that, as their eyes all widened.
You've met her. 1,000 years ago, yes,
the grass man acknowledged.
When I was newly sprouted. I'm afraid I don't remember it very well, but from what I do recall, this is entirely congruent with her behavior. Why didn't you tell us this before?
Bao asked, shaking his head.
You didn't ask.
Spar blinked.
Is it important? Never mind,
Ryu growled.
Doesn't look like she's here. That's the real problem. Where else would she be? Who's there?
3 huge voices boomed suddenly, and they turned around to see ghost-like spirits made of flickering smoke rush in behind them. One was blue, one red, and one green, and they all glared angrily at them.
Intruders. Ryu?
Nina asked, raising a hand in the air before her.
Yeah, these guys I read about,
Ryu told them.
We're gonna have to kick their asses before they'll back off. Let's get it over with. Figures,
Bao sighed.
Just what I need right now.
Kat grinned savagely.
This should take the edge off. Wait.
All 3 yelled hastily as the group closed in around them.
You're him, right? Ryu? We surrender. Wait.
Ryu blinked, pausing in the act of drawing his sword from its sheath.
You what? We give up.
They shouted.
Don't do it. We're sorry. Spoil sports,
Kat muttered, relaxing. Everybody ignored her.
Very well then,
Nina told them, still sounding skeptical.
Where's Deez? Deez.
The 3 spirits exchanged glances, still speaking in unison.
Is out. No, really.
Ryu retorted.
We had no idea. That's why we're asking where she is. She didn't tell us,
the spirits confessed, then panicked as the group began to close in on them again.
Wait. It's the truth. But there was somebody else. She found some strange man exploring the ruins, and left with him. Maybe he'd know where she is now. That a fact?
Bao raised an eyebrow.
You ain't gonna tell us his name was Martin, are you? Martin.
The spirits blinked.
No, his name was stranger than that. It was Rats, or Watts, or something. Wait, what?
Jean blurted, as they all blinked.
It was Monsieur Watts. That was it.
The 3 spirits all cheered.
If you know him, go ask him. Oh, you had better bet we will,
Ryu growled, as they all walked out past the spirits.
And clean this dump up. Why should we?
One of the spirits yelled.
Deez is the one who behaves so disgraceful.
He broke off as the other 2 silenced him, a moment before the group turned around to glare.
We'll do it.
They all promised.
Good,
Rand grunted.
Now let's get out of this hellhole. I warned you it was, you know,
Sten pointed out.
A hellhole, I mean.
Everybody ignored him, too, even Kat didn't seem in the mood. As soon as they were outside, Jean warped them back home, and without a word from anybody, they walked over to Watt's house and knocked on the door.
Yes.
The old man said cheerfully as he opened it.
Oh. You're back already? Where was it you were going again? The great desert of Arad,
Ryu told him flatly.
To look for Deez, the legendary sorceress. Mind if we come in? Ah.
Watt's expression faded into neutrality as he stepped back.
Yes, yes, of course. Thanks,
he grunted as they tromped in. Like most of the houses, it was pleasantly furnished, if not expensively, but none of them took seats.
We'll try not to get sand on anything. Heard an interesting story down there,
Bao said, crossing his arms.
Used to poke around old ruins, did you? I was something of an amateur archaeologist in my youth, yes,
Watts admitted.
Really, I just enjoyed finding interesting things. And yes, I met the legendary sorceress who you just spent a week in that hellhole looking for. And you didn't tell us this. Why?
Cat asked, deceptively lightly.
Well.
Watts shrugged.
You didn't ask, did you? That's it.
She snapped.
I'm gonna.
Easy, Rand told her, putting a restraining hand on her arm.
No hitting the citizens. Actually, that's not all of it,
Watts admitted, looking sheepish.
I sort of ended up having to swear an oath, as well.
He held up his hand as they all tensed up.
Not one to refuse to tell. On the other hand, she wanted me to test you. Test us.
Ryu repeated flatly.
Indeed.
Watts nodded.
To be specific, test those who'll come looking for me. She's the only one who's ever been able to outriddle me, you see, and so I swore to only reveal her location to the ones who could solve hers. Her riddles, that is.
The group exchanged a flat look.
Riddles,
Spar repeated.
Plural. How many, exactly, are there? 3,
Watts replied.
Here's the first. On a touch-tone telephone, what number is in the upper right corner?
The group exchanged another look.
What the hell is a telephone?
Ryu demanded.
Q len for is touch-tone.
Jean yelled, even his vast cheer apparently failing him.
How the hell do you put a number in a corner?
Cat snarled. Everybody paused to look at her.
Perhaps you should allow me to handle this,
Spar suggested before she could yell again.
I'll help,
Nina offered, and Bao nodded as well.
Get Nero, too,
he told Ryu.
You never know with that guy. The rest of you guys, well, don't take this the wrong way, but... Oh, no.
Ryu raised his hands, as did Sten, Cat, Rand, and Jean.
You guys want to take this, go right ahead. We're out of here, then, if you don't need us. You'll know where to find us when you're done.
Turning, he marched out, the other 4 behind him.
Does anybody else have the feeling we may have just had a fast one pulled on us?
Nina asked suspiciously as they left. Heading over to their home, they shoved the door open and marched for the stairs.
What's up?
Nero asked from his usual position behind the front counter as they stomped past.
You find her or what? Not yet,
Ryu grumbled.
Bao, Spar, and Nina are on it, over in Watt's house. They said they could use your help. Hey.
Nero blinked.
Watts? Well, okay, but that don't make no sense, son. Sense is optional in this crew,
Rand muttered as they trudged up to their rooms.
Thought you knew that by now.
By dinner time, they'd all bathed and restored themselves to a marginally better humor, though only marginally. Those who had been working on the riddles were another story, though they had taken turns on breaks to clean themselves up as well. They'd only made it through 2 of the 3 riddles, and were exhausted and irritable, Nina in particular. When Bao, Spar, and Nero suggested that she get some sleep and let them finish the job, she didn't object. Neither did any of the other 5, who all turned in early as well. After the week in the desert, they needed it. Power. We need more of your power. God needs more of your power. Give your heart to God. Pray to God. Praise God. Sacrifice your heart and soul to God. You will become God's power. It was sometime around midnight that Ryu's sleep was rudely interrupted by a string of profanities, screamed at the top of Bo's lungs, that echoed through the slumbering town like an explosion. He had been on his back, and his eyes snapped open, staring at the ceiling as the townspeople responded with a great deal of noisy clamor, most of it sounding almost as angry as Ryu felt.
When I get my hands on him,
he growled, turning over. From the sounds of it, though, several other people were already on it, he heard most of the bullier men in town starting to yell as well, and there was a lot of stomping coming from the stairs, indicating that the rest of the team were planning on making their objections known immediately. Ryu decided to leave it to them, closing his eyes again and burrowing deeper under the sheets. A few moments later, another stream of obscenities erupted into the night, this time in Kat's voice, and one of Ryu's eyes began to twitch.
Damn it, people,
he growled, shoving his head under his pillow, as the noise increased further.
Whatever it is, it can wait until tomorrow. For Saint Eva's sake.
When Nino was the third one to shriek a series of curses, louder than she had ever sounded before, however, Ryu sat bolt upright before climbing out of bed and throwing his clothes on.
All right, what's going on?
He demanded as he practically fell down the stairs. It looked like he was the last one up, the rest of the team were all piling into the meeting room, all of them save for Spar looking angry. Bao, Kat, and Nina appeared to be particularly enraged.
About time you got up,
Kat growled, eyes flashing.
Let's go. We're heading over to the capital, right now. Back to hometown.
Ryu blinked, still slightly sleepy.
Why? Wait, did you solve the riddles? Do you know where she is? Oh, yeah, we know where she is,
Bao spat.
Well then, where is she?
Ryu asked, frowning.
Hometown's kind of a big place. We're gonna need more to go on than that.
Nina told him. A moment passed. A fourth blast of profanity exploded through the town. The streets of hometown were empty by the time Dee stumbled out of the bar and began weaving her way back, but there was nothing to worry about, she had a reputation in this city by now, and not even the stupidest mugger would dare to try messing with her. The last one who had wound up in the river minus his head once she had confirmed that money hadn't been the only thing on his mind. Singing a song that the rest of the world had forgotten, she stumbled down the streets, musing to herself that no matter how many times she took a human form, she'd never be able to get used to legs. As always, the security around the Orion Magic School was a joke. Climbing over the outer wall, she was easily able to avoid the patrols and slip through the window of her dorm room as well. Just as she was climbing in, though, she paused, the room was occupied, and that shouldn't have happened, not since her roommate had moved out. Muttering the first words of a spell under her breath, she climbed in and raised a fireball in her hand, ready to throw it if necessary. Her roommate was there, and so were her two old drinking buddies, along with the rest of their gang, a grass man now among them. Even Nero had come with them, and all 9 were spread around the room, leaning back against the walls with their arms folded and angry glares on their faces.
Oh.
Dee sighed, levitating the fireball as she stepped into the room.
So, you figured it out. Gee, you think so, genius?
Bao growled.
An explanation, please, if you don't mind, Dees,
Nina said coldly.
Explanation.
Dee's eyes narrowed slightly, no matter how much she knew she probably deserved at least some of this, putting up with that kind of tone had never been something she had been good at.
I had to go undercover. You've probably guessed, but normally, I'm kind of noticeable. We figured that much,
Sten agreed, flipping a knife idly in the air.
What we don't get is how awfully convenient it was that you ended up rooming with Nina here, and hanging out with these two, too. You're not gonna try and tell us that was a coincidence, are you? Nah.
Dee shrugged.
I set that one up, all right. How else was I supposed to keep the other vultures off of you? Trout.
Nero guessed.
Bingo.
Dee pointed at him and gave him a thumbs up.
You really think it was a coincidence that he's the only demon who never messed with you until you messed with him? No way. It was because he knew if he violated the rules, I'd come down on him like a meteor strike. Him, and Lauden's agent in here, too. Lauden's agent?
Ryu blinked.
He had one in here, too. Strike you as suspicious that somebody did a lot more to help you out than anybody would reasonably expect.
Dees pointed out, and most of them closed their eyes, snarling various curses.
Duke Kilgore,
Nina murmured.
My eyes must be sewn shut. They've got people everywhere,
Dees explained quietly.
Both sides. Remember that lumberjack up in Tagwoods? Baba? His real name's Bunyan, and he's a lot older than you would think. Lauden's side might want to help you, but I've seen where that goes, and so has an old friend of mine. The one who set it up this way, this time, in the first place. He's the one who asked me to keep an eye on you 3 to make sure nobody messed with you while you were in hometown. So you're one of the referees, then?
Ryu raised an eyebrow.
Good way of putting it,
she agreed.
Of course, I'm a bit of a special case, but if you went looking for me, you've already figured that out. And you don't figure this little trick of yours changes things a little?
Rand asked.
I don't know, big guy,
she murmured, lowering her eyelids and widening her smile.
You tell me. Stop that,
Bao told her as Rand flushed slightly.
Make me. They're right,
Ryu growled, cutting that off.
We're not happy about this. At all. But...
he sighed.
Now that I'm actually thinking about it. You've been helping us navigate this whole mess the way we'd like to. I'll give you that much. Believe it or not, kids, but I am on your side,
Dees told them firmly.
Not Lauden's, and definitely not Barberry's. Yours. That's my role, in all of this, and it always was.
She raised her arms above her head and stretched, smirking slightly as the males all either looked away or pretended to.
It's for the best that you came along, really. I was starting to get bored with learning magic from somebody else. Be more fun if I pick up what I forgot while I was sleeping again all by myself anyways. You could use another black mage on the team, right? One who really knows her stuff.
The group traded a look.
That seems to be the case,
Ryu conceded, putting a hand over his eyes.
Great.
Whispering the words of changing, Dees winked as she finally returned to her preferred form, her legs melding together and shifting into the lower body of a snake.
The name's Dees, legendary sorceress of Wisdom. I'd give you my resume, but I think you already know it. Indeed we do,
the grass man murmured, and she regarded it quietly for a moment.
We've met before, haven't we?
She guessed.
When you were still a seedling. Spar, isn't it?
When it nodded, she sighed.
That's gonna take some getting used to. Enough joking around for the moment. I'll tell you what you need to know, and I won't tell you what you need to not know. I honestly don't know myself just how far free will is going to get you, but I'll do everything I can to help you give it your best shot. Good enough for me,
Nero commented, and the others all nodded, some more slowly than others. Cat and Bao, in particular, weren't meeting her eyes now, and that stung much more than their earlier anger had, but it was a pain she was used to, after thousands of years of similar situations.
Welcome to the team,
Ryu told her, and though he still looked angry, she could tell it wouldn't last forever.
Glad to be on board,
she said cheerfully, and meant it.
So, where are we going, now that you've found me? I'm assuming you're working on something right now. Tunlin,
they all said in unison, faces blank. A moment passed. A scream of aggravation rang through the city night. You're building a mystery.